Hi everyone, my name is Danny. Unfortunately, I cannot be there in person, but I'm really glad to be here to share this analysis, or more like a data review about our current state of Orderflow, block building, latency game. Um, I'm a data scientist at Flashbots. Cool. I'll go through my agenda next. So I'll go through how Ethereum's transaction lifecycle today look like with a MEV supply chain theory, or you can call it transaction supply network. And then the next is we'll look at how the order flow market look like with the PBS or like MEV boost, MEV supply chain structure today. And then we'll look at how the block building market look like and how different builders, their behavior look like in data, and also the latency game and time aspect of the block bidding market. Next. So we have two diagrams here. So quick intro about MEV, and I assume everyone heard about MEV and PBS since you're in PBS day here today. But what is MEV supply chain? In the past, in the proof of work day, if you're making a trade, the miner had the full control about if they want to insert your trade or if they can insert any other trade of their own or per their benefits to be before yours or behind yours. In the proof of stake date, nowadays with a even more concerning problem about MEV can cause centralization on stake and therefore cause centralization of the network, we introduced the PBS proposer builder separation proposal, and MEV boost is an implementation from Flashbots about it. And the vanilla model of it is basically splitting the miner row into three rows. From searcher, they will send bundles to builders, and then they will send the builder. The builders will bid for the full block and then propose to the validator. Validator will pick the highest value and then basically get the header of the block and then settle it to the chain. And then nowadays, with another thing called order flow auction, this structure can even look like the one below, where searcher is sort of separated from this chain. Basically, they take a new row as a bidder of the order flow auction, but again, the flow goes like user submit a transaction to the wallet goes through RPC, potentially broadcasted to a bunch of searchers or bidder, and then they will try to search for the maximum extraction of this order, and then submit a bundle to builder and then to validator. So this is a very important structure that we should remember about the analysis, because I'll go through each layer of the market. Next one, please. And so how does exact a user's transaction or order look like on a concrete example of an order flow auction? We can use Flashbot's map share as an example here. So either user or wallet can submit in representation of user or a RPC provider. They can basically send to a Flashbot protect RPC, basically an endpoint where you submit your transactions through, which then actually make your transaction go through a private mempool, and then it will broadcast to a bunch of matchmaker services, which is the MEV share services, which will then broadcast the transactions information based on users' privacy setting to a bunch of MEV searchers, and they will try their best to see, okay, I'm trying to background this transaction without basically hurting users' price, and see if I can make any profits from making another transaction behind yours. And then they will compete to send bundles to the MapShare services, and then the service will try to compare what's the highest value, so to submit it to the builders. In the past, Flashbots started with submitting the bundles to Flashbots builder, but for improvement on the inclusion of the transactions, we also recently released a feature about allowing user to submit to any of the builder of their preference. In this case, it will make the user's settlement to be faster and better. And then the builder will broadcast to a bunch of relay, and then relay will then see who has the highest bid, and the validator gonna take the highest one. Even next one, please. Another example to make it a concrete concept on a DEX orders lifecycle today. Here's a lot of interesting thing to point it out. So when the user comes into a DEX or a DEX aggregator, what they will do is basically they will try to check across the different liquidities on chain and off chain from their professional market makers that is quoting and making the RFQ order for the user. They will compare the price with Uniswap. They will check what's the best price for Uniswap, SushiSwap, all the other AMMs, and then they will compare. Okay, this is the best order. I'm going to send this to the public mempool likely, as in the past how we operate. The AMM orders, if they sent into public mempool, then will be broadcasted to everyone who's listening to a node. And so here there's a bunch of MEV searchers, or basically you could call them whoever is like accessing the public AMM orders will try to arbitrage you or search on this and submit bundles to builders. Another route is that if now DEX aggregator or basically the applications submit their orders into a private mempool, aka OFAs, then they will have their OFA searchers trying to background you, in a much better informed and actually protected way, and then submit through bundlers and to the block builders. So what are we seeing here? All these highlighted red blocks here. If we go next slides. Turns out today, in our current state, is that pretty much the same entities. The RFQ providers are market makers who are like professional trading firm. The toxic flow that is taking the arbitrage on AMM liquidities are market makers. MEV searcher, block builders are pretty much from a bunch of big trading firms. It doesn't sound so good. Next slide, please. And with the coming change in our Ethereum network, potentially account abstraction bundlers, and maybe Uniswap X fillers can again become the same players. That's some psyops. Next one, please. So yeah, one conclusion or first observation is that the order is flowing right now through a bunch of monopolies who are basically accessing each layer, or basically they are touching the order flow in each layer of the markets. Next, please. Right. So another observation here is that with some data analysis we collected in the past, earlier this year we were trying to do a monitoring on the public mempool, and we saw that there are a bunch of transactions that got settled through different block builders. We're never seeing mempool or in the public mempool, which means there's a adoption going up for the private order flow by different builders. We can pretty much see from January to March, it grew from like 1, 2, or 4% up to 7% per block builders. And this data, I assume, will be only higher after all the OFA launch in April. Next slides, please. Another angle of this data set is that when we look at different OFA order flow auctions, transaction flow percentage out of all the EVM transaction percentage, we can see that pretty much like MEV blocker and the Flashbots Protect or Flashbots MEV share are having around like 5-6% of EVM transactions out of all the transactions. Calibra also have a few thousands every day getting settled. So yeah, another observation is that private mempool will have adoption going up along with the adoption of order flow auction. Next one. And then we look at the block builder market share. Here, the current summary will be basically, it's a 2080 market where basically a few leading winners are taking the majority of the block inclusion share, including rsync builder, builder 69, beaver build, flashbots builders, and along with them, there are a lot of new small and strategic builders coming out, including like Titan, F1B. We also have Block Sprout and Block Native being playing in the block bidding game for a while as well as important players. So pretty much we can see a diversifying of the participation of this block building game. And then if we would summarize their behaviors in the next slide as a different type of builder, so we will be able to see that, next slide please. So we'll be able to see that we pretty much can see a bunch of builders. They can be defined as neutral builder. Flashbots runs nonprofit builder, which means pretty much it's a very naive setting in terms of how you are transferring the profits in the line. We're basically transferring everything to the proposer and include everything in our bidding value. It's mostly basically a bundle merging algorithm as of today. There's also strategic builder who are also neutral, but they may take more approach to be more competitive. For example, they may keep some profits from some more profitable block when they know that potentially they're bidding higher than anyone else. They may subsidize the block value when they know they're maybe slightly lower, but they can win by just subsidizing a little bit. They may attract also private order flow by subsidizing and become better at inclusion rate. And then we also have another big type, which are, I would say, like they're the most competitive today as a block builders, which are searcher builder. If you remember earlier, we introduced this concept of like in the MEF supply chain, there's searcher who are basically checking all the order flows MEV value or potential extractable value, and then trying to bundle transactions with them as their own private transaction flow. And then the next, they will basically be able to submit their order flow to their own builder, and basically to have a very exclusive amount of transaction, which are highly MEV valuable. So to compete with the block value, which means all those things are making them very competitive compared to others. Next slides. If you are trying to analyze their behavior on chain, they may seem different. For example, if you are a typical builder, you're pretty much gonna put your address on chain as a recipient first, and then you will appear as a miner basically for this block as of today. But then in the end of the block, you will try to transfer as much as profit you're bidding for the validator to receive as a transaction in the end of the block. But if you're a zero profit builder, you pretty much don't even need to touch any of the profits. You would maybe even just set the validator's fee recipient as the miner of the block, basically let them to receive everything to basically also save some gas. Next, please. And when we look at the open data set that MeVBoost is streaming for everyone from each relay, we can pretty much see that builders, they have different behavioral preference in terms of which relay they are connected to or submitting their block bidding to. But pretty much every builder would want to have a higher or better coverage of different relays. And then most of them submit to the three major relays like Flashbots and Builder 69. But we also see rsync and Blocksprout, they are submitting to 5 or even 7, pretty much like every relay. So to make sure they're competing at their best. Next, please. So there's a few more metrics here that's very interesting, which is like when we talk about the time aspect of the bidding, it's a whole latency game for you to be competitive and taking the basically like sniping at the very last second, right before the validator is checking which block is the most profitable. So we call this validators get header timestamp, which is basically whenever the validator is checking, okay, what's the available best bid I'm getting right now. And they're checking with the relays. And it's very interesting to see that different validators here, they have different behavior in terms of when they will prefer to check the get header. Some may have very consistent data points of when they're gonna check it. And that actually very interestingly result into builders' behavior, which is basically they will never actually bid from the very beginning of the slot, but only at the very few minutes, very few seconds, which is when the validators will check the get header. Our Flashbots builder in the past were pretty naive to check since the very beginning of the slot, but we made some improvement after this realization, and we updated the bidding time to be the same as around like -3 seconds pretty much. Next one, please. And another aspect is that if you check how frequent each builder can update their bids as basically their bidding latency, next slide, please. We pretty much see that this is a box plot of different builders' updating time for the latency, basically a bid updating latency chart. If we zoom to the next one, we can pretty much see the number here that On the very left, and on the very right, Beaver and rsync are the one that has the highest performance, where they can update their bits within 200 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds, which makes them to be able to react very fast towards the market. Whenever they see a price shift, say on centralized exchange, their searcher will be able to prepare a new bunch of arbitrage transactions and then update their block from their builders. This also caused a very interesting observation in the next slide, is that with some improvement in some relay, like optimistic relay from ultrasound, which is basically allowing the builder to skip a few hundred milliseconds by adding some collateral deposit, we are able to see that searcher builder especially can benefit from this improvement largely. If we see here, the blue line is the win rate of their optimistic submission, and then the orange one will be the normal one. So it can be even like 7 or 8 times higher when they are submitting optimistically. But yeah, again, like right now, today, only searcher builder can benefit from this improvement, because they're only one that can react this fast and update their strategy. Yeah. A few last metrics about the relays. Relay also, as of today, they are supposed to be the one that's not taking any profits from the MEV supply chain, but also taking a very important role of validating the blocks they are receiving from the builders. As of today, a bunch of players are running a bunch of relays. The biggest one are Flashbots, Gnosis, and Ultrasound. We can see pretty much Ultrasound is the leading one here with a bunch of improvements, taking a quarter of the market share, and then it's Flashbots. Next, please. One very important thing is for Relay is that the adoption from the validator side, basically how many validator are checking the bids from the Relay is pretty much a metrics here to show Flashbots has the highest adoption as a Relay, and then Blocksprout Max Profit, Ultrasound, Gnosis. Next, please. On the time scale, we can also see that like across different slot time, we can see like per every 100 slot, we can see Flashbots having around like 90 and a little bit higher adoption by all the validators across a 100 slot. And then the next is Blocks around Max Profit and Gnosis and Ultrasound. One last metrics here is that we can also see that the diversity of diversity of the builders, basically how many builders are submitting the bids towards a relay, matters in terms of like how many total submission you will get naturally. And also we can pretty much see Ultrasound and Flashbots are leading towards the right and also are leading towards the higher market share. So you can see a pretty strong signal here of the correlation. Yeah. So next, please. Yeah, that's a data review of all the layers of the market structures. And my final note would be, if you're an Ethereum user, you should definitely check out the Flashbots Protect RPC today, and so to avoid uninformed MEV and potentially get refunds from our OFA service, MEV Share. If you're an MEV searcher, I have a few memes for you in the end. Yeah, so if you're a MEV searcher, please send us bundles if you click through the next 4 slides. Okay, cool, thanks.